What's up, guys? It's Parallax Abstraction, and this is Retro Flashforward, showcasing gaming's roots in the current generation. So this came out of nowhere. Holy crap, it's a new Double Dragon game. No, for real. So a little while ago, Arc System Works, which is a rather prolific developer of principally crazy Japanese fighting games, picked up the Double Dragon IP, as well as I think possibly all of the original Technos IPs from Million, which was the company that was holding on to those and not doing a lot with them, frankly. And kind of out of nowhere, they went, hey, we're going to make a new Double Dragon game, and it's going to be inspired and done in the art style of the NES Double Dragon titles, but it's a whole new thing, and everyone was like, sure, why not? I guess so. I've talked about Double Dragon on the channel before a fair bit, mostly talking about the kind of awful Double Dragon trilogy that came out a while ago, and a buddy and I did a co-op playthrough of Double Dragon Neon a while back. And I mean, I had to check this out, right? I had to know what this game was about. Ain't that good, sadly. So, this is the PC version. This is also out on the PlayStation 4. The port is pretty bad. It runs at 30 frames a second, though so did the old NES game, so I guess that's, you know, kind of fitting. There is controller support, though it's a little bit janky, even though this game runs on the Unity engine. They have added a few things. If you look here, there are actually a bunch of combo moves you can do now, much more so than you could in the previous games. So there are a lot of options there, though they're a little hard to pull off because the timing is not very good in this. Yeah, the controller support is there, but it's a little janky. Playing this with a keyboard is awful. You can, but I don't like it, and the keys are absolutely terrible. You can rebind your controller buttons, can't rebind the keyboard keys. And look, EXSD. The frig are you... Anyway. Also, here's a fun problem. So you see this option that's missing here in the middle? Yeah, that's supposed to be a mode called the Tower, which is supposed to be a wave-based sort of survival mode thing. And you get that for beating the main game. I beaten the main game. Restarted the game and my save was gone. Common problem if you look in the Steam forums. Yeah. This is not a very good PC version. So, there's a story in this, as much as you can have a story in a Double Dragon game. But interestingly enough, this is supposed to overlap sort of the beginning of the first Double Dragon game, where Marion, the sort of girlfriend of one of these guys, gets sort of knocked out and taken away by thugs. Though, supposedly, this takes place between Double Dragon 2 and 3, as I understand it. And that doesn't make any sense, because at the beginning of Double Dragon 2, your girlfriend gets killed. So, even in the NES game, I think. So, I don't even. I mean, people talk about Double Dragon's story more as a joke than anything else, okay? So, yeah, who cares about that? So, how does it play? Well, you're looking at it right here. It looks like the NES titles. It animates exactly the same way. It looks like... there are a lot of new enemies in this, but in many ways it does look like they just took the original sprites and slapped them into a new thing. There's that massive UI on the bottom that you cannot remove. There's also a lot of sound effects missing, like, for example, the thing that tells you to go to the right there. In the NES games, there was a sound effect for that. There's nothing of that nature here. There's also this kind of god-awful music that's playing. So there is a remix soundtrack in this and a retro soundtrack that you can toggle in the options. We'll probably switch to the retro one later. This remix one honestly sounds like somebody took a cheap keyboard and maybe Pro Tools and something like that and redid them. I don't think it's good music at all. I think it's pretty... I mean, it's got that sort of 80s sounding cheese factor that one kind of would expect out of Double Dragon, but I also just not... It doesn't do much for me. I'm really not a fan of it. So, but it's the same thing. You beat your way through levels, and you get to the end of it, you beat a bunch of bosses, and that's kind of it. Now, here's the thing with this. Some people might find this to be a little fun nostalgia trip, because, I mean, it's punch, kick, jump, and if you press buttons and combinations, there's special moves. Though the hilarious part about this is, as well, is that if you're playing with a controller, so... When these games existed on the NES, the way it worked is you had a punch button, you had a kick button, and then if you pressed both at the same time, you jumped. And you can still do that here, but if you have, because you have extra buttons on the controller here, you can't do this with the keyboard. You can actually bind buttons. You can have a dedicated jump button, and you can also bind buttons to certain special moves. So if you just, for example, like that, if you just want to execute a special move without having to do the button combination, you can choose to just map that to a button on the controller, but you can't with the keyboard for some stupid reason. It kind of takes some of the purpose out of the whole thing when you can just, you know, it takes all the skill out of it when you just bind a button to a key. But unfortunately, the control response in this is so poor that a lot of the times pulling off the combinations is very frustrating. It won't respond the way it should. You can be like, damn it, I know I pressed that properly and it doesn't work correctly, and yeah, it's really, really frustrating. And so mapping that stuff might be your preferred way to do it, even though it is a little bit of a cheat. You can play 2-player as well, local only, no online. That doesn't entirely shock me. But you know, so this is basically the first level boss in Double Dragon 2: The Revenge, which is a much better Double Dragon game. And this is a regular enemy in this, and you'll have to take him out frequently. You know, some of the levels you can only move left to right like this. You only have a 2D plane. There are other levels, as you've already seen, where you can sort of move up and down, and just like the original Double Dragon games, the best way to do it is to sort of kite the enemies in a row so that they are not exactly on the same plane as you are, and then you take them out that way. And yeah, so that's a mission. Most of the missions are like this. There's only 12 missions in this game. Each gets a little story thing like this in between with some not honestly really great art and a little bit of story. The levels are all very short, and most of them are like... So you notice how in that last level, we took out a few enemies, and then there was a whole lot of nothing, like waiting for that platform move from one end to the other, going up the elevator, things like that. That's what a lot of these levels are. There are bits where you'll fight a few enemies, and then a whole lot of nothing for a while, and then another couple of enemies, and then it's over. Some of these levels last well under 5 minutes. I beat the game, though you can't see it here because my save got removed, but I actually beat this game in around an hour. It's also very, very easy. Double Dragon games, the original ones, they were known to be challenging. They weren't necessarily challenging in that they needed a lot of skill. They were challenging in that, frankly, the AI was pretty cheap and unfair in many cases. The AI still has some of that cheapness here, but by and large, the game is just simple. Like, you get 5 credits when you start off like this. You get 3 lives per credit, and you pick up from where you left off if you choose to continue. I beat the entire game in around an hour, and I only ran out of credits once. And mostly that was because a couple of the later levels have really, really horrible platforming sections in them, where you are having to fight with the mushy controls and bad jump height to jump across multiple level objects that will either disappear or spin or move. It can throw you off. Sometimes the jumps won't work out the way you want them to. I had one section where I lost an entire credit's worth of lives just because it wouldn't jump where I wanted, and it just kept dying instantly. If that hadn't happened, I would have beat the game without ever having to restart. And even when you do run out of lives, assuming your save doesn't get wiped like mine did here, you can just level select wherever you want to start, even if it's the last level, and start with a full slate of 5 credits. So it's trivially easy to get to the end of this. There's really no challenge involved here whatsoever. But as you can see here, it's playing like an old school Double Dragon game. As you beat the levels, well, eventually you'll not only unlock the challenge tower, again, assuming your save doesn't get wiped, but you'll unlock different characters. There is a 2-player duel mode in this. It's only 2-player, and it's just a really, really bad fighting game, basically. It's you and another player in an arena with life bars, and your goal is to beat the other guy up. That's it. It's pretty awful. I don't like it at all. And, the tower mode is the most interesting thing, but again, all you get for that is more character unlocks for the duel mode. That's basically your only reward for this. This game has... it doesn't even have Steam trading cards in it. It has achievements, but even the achievements are janky. Like, I don't actually know if you can see my Steam UI here, but you see how the achievements, like the one for beating the game is just story_clear, and they're in all caps, so it's like story_clear, Okada_tower, you know, God 10F, which is getting apparently to the 10th floor in the tower mode. it just seems slapped together with no care put into it. You know, there's no cloud saves, there's no anything else, and the only in-game rewards you get are more characters for the really crappy duel mode that feels like it was tacked on. It's a shoddily put together package. Honestly, this feels like something where I was gonna say, you know, oh, it feels like something interns put together. I'm not gonna be that mean about it. This is probably something where Arc System Works got the license to this game, and they probably had an employee or a couple of employees who were screwing around with Unity and some of these assets and whatnot, probably just prototyping something to see what they could do for fun. And a manager saw it and went, hey, that's kind of neat. Why don't you finish this up and we'll put this out? And maybe it'll gauge some interest in Double Dragon, and maybe we can try to build up hype for a new game in the series or something like that. That's what this feels like to me. It's just, it's very poor. Like, if you want to really stroke nostalgia for Double Dragon, you should probably base it off the arcade assets, not the NES assets. Like, my favorite Double Dragon, I am on record for, is Double Dragon 2 for the NES, but most people probably remember the arcade game, especially the first arcade game, the most fondly. Can't blame you if that's the case, but that's not what you get with this. Most people, like, a lot of people played the first Double Dragon on NES, but most people agree it's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad representation of the game and the experience, and that's what they did this off of, you know. It's just, you know, another example, the scoring system in this. You know, I like a well-designed scoring system, and the Double Dragon scoring system was never all that impressive. You basically just get 100 points for doing basically anything at all, you know, landing any kind of hit or anything like that. It's not the most complicated thing in the world. But there's no high score table in this, there's no online leaderboards, there's nothing. It doesn't even maintain the factory, or, you know, the high score. If you set a high score here and restart the game, it doesn't save it. So there's no point to it even being there at all. And you know, this game came out on Steam and the PlayStation 4, two platforms that have integrated leaderboard APIs. Nothing like that. You know, they just didn't bother. I mean, why did you even bother putting a scoring system in it in that case? It's completely irrelevant in this day and age to do that, especially when it takes up, you know, 20% of the screen like that bottom thing does there. I just don't get it. I really don't. So, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch... Damn it. Let me go. There we go. I'm going to switch back to the retro music so you guys can see what this is like. It sounds... Oop. There it is. Okay. Now, I'm trying to remember how... There it is. So, yeah, if you press the start button on the controller, you can pick your mission. Any missions that you've already cleared. I had the whole game unlocked, like I said, and my save just disappeared. And yeah, there's a lot of people complaining about that. So, oh, and I already beat this, but this is a short mission. So I personally think this music sounds much better, mostly because I'm a retro nut, and also just because the updated soundtrack I think is just terrible. I think it sounds awful. So this is much more fitting to the type of presentation, I think. I think, if anything, this is what the default should have been. You know, in games like Double Dragon Neon, which was kind of a reimagining of the first game, you know, that had a sort of cheesy synthy soundtrack too, but it was done with intent and kind of mixed with chiptunes. It was actually done by Jake Kaufman, who's a fantastic game music composer. This just feels like something that was thrown together very quick by, you know, some Arc sound designer, or they grabbed some OC remix project and just, you know, imported it in or something like that. It just, the whole thing feels completely half-assed. But here's the thing. It's only $7 US. It's really cheap. And, you know, $7 for an hour of old school beat 'em up fun, a lot of people might dig that. And I couldn't necessarily blame you if that's the case. You know, I really dislike Double Dragon Trilogy, which costs more, which took the original games and kind of murdered parts of them because it was based on a crappy mobile port. You know, this is an original game. It is a new Double Dragon game, for better or worse. And it's the same price as for an all-new game, even though it's not necessarily put together that great from a production value standpoint. It's the same price as buying, you know, Double Dragon 2 on the Wii U Virtual Console, because the Virtual Console is such a colossal ripoff. And you have to have a Wii U for that too, which almost nobody does. So... you know, I love beat 'em ups. I really do, and there aren't very many of them out there. It's hard to find a good quality beat 'em up these days, and obviously you're rarely going to find one that has the Double Dragon name on it, though we do have Neon, which again I think is definitely the better product. So you could do a lot worse than this. There's no doubt. For the money, it might be worth it for you to have a little bit of fun. And the Challenge Tower mode, I think, would actually be pretty cool. I actually would have enjoyed playing that, but truth be told, once I'm done recording this, I'm probably going to Steam refund this game because I was looking for... I had a little bit of fun with this campaign, but by the end, I was just getting really frustrated and bored and wanted it to be over, and I was like, well, this Challenge Tower thing looks really cool. I'm going to play my way through to the end, unlock that, and I'll probably spend some good time with that and have some fun. And then the game broke and deleted my save, and now if I want the Challenge Tower, I'm gonna have to play through this whole boring thing again, and believe me, this is really boring, and, you know, I'm someone who's played Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, like, multiple times over, because I think that game's a ton of fun, and I find this campaign incredibly boring, and yeah, I'm gonna get to the end, and then it might delete my save again. So, kinda F that? Yeah. Maybe if they actually patch this, though I don't think this game has received a patch, at least on PC since it came out, and I wouldn't be surprised if it never does. Maybe if they patched it to fix it so that it didn't friggin' delete your save, maybe I'd keep it or buy it again on sale, but I don't know. Yes, it's cheap, but the thing is, it's a game with production values from 30 years ago. It should be cheap. You know, games have evolved. You've got to evolve, and this doesn't, and that's fine. If it chooses to play to that old style and those old mechanics, that's not a problem inherently. But I don't really care what you're charging for it. Do it right or don't do it at all. And this doesn't do it right. The PC version is awful. It's lacking in all kinds of options. The controller support's not very good. The only feature it takes advantage of on Steam is Steam Achievements, and does it in a completely half-assed way. It can't even maintain save data properly. You know, they didn't up the quality of the animation so that it runs at 60 frames a second. They did add a few more enemies, but they're just mostly variations on a theme. You know, the story's not very good. The levels are incredibly short. The whole game is incredibly short. The duel mode is a complete throwaway waste of time. There's nothing here. And that's the funny thing about Double Dragon. Like, this is such a weird franchise, because even as beat 'em ups go, I'm gonna say it, Double Dragon, a lot of people have nostalgia for it because it was one of the early entries in a new genre. It was never very good. And people remember it more for nostalgia than quality in many cases. And, you know, there's a reason Technos kind of isn't around today, because they tried to milk this formula far more than they should have. And we already got Double Dragon Neon. That was taking the series in a really cool direction, both artistically and gameplay-wise. It was a big evolution. And this ignores all of that. It ignores everything that was cool about that. And it goes back to the old school style, maintaining, not improving on anything that was bad and that they could have improved on, and does it with really lousy production quality from a technical end at the same time. And as I said, it just feels like somebody's fun project that Arc decided to slap their name on. And like, Arc has been preaching this as, oh, we have some people from the original Double Dragon involved in this. And I'm like, well, a lot of companies say that as if that's an impressive thing, where instead you kind of go, well, has those people made new video games in the last 30 years, or do they still only know what to make of games from that era? See, and here's the little prequel bit. Spoiler warning. If this is supposed to take place between Double Dragon 2 and 3, this doesn't make sense because she's supposed to be dead. But, yeah, the whole thing just feels like a really half-assed effort. If this is their attempt to gauge reaction in making a new higher production value Double Dragon, I think this was a bad way to go about it, because I think people like myself who do remember Double Dragon with a certain amount of retro nostalgia are going to kind of go, well, this is a crappy thing that doesn't do much respect to it. And new players are going to come in and go, oh my god, what the heck did people ever like about this? This is awful. Like, worst of both worlds, if you ask me. And I had no problem with the retro art style or even the retro mechanics, but they could have done more with other elements that they just didn't bother with. And nah, it's just, it feels like a half-assed effort, and yeah, it's cheap. You could probably buy it for cheap and have some measure of fun with it if you like this type of game. But I also think buying it even for $8 sort of validates the half-assed job they did here, and I think it sends the wrong message and tells Arc, yeah, we can crap out these lousy pixel art games like this, and no one's, you know, people will pay for it, and we don't have to put any real effort into it, and that's not what I want to see. Arc can make some incredible, crazy stuff, and, you know, they've made some really amazing games over the years, and this just isn't one of them. This is just, it's cheap, and it's cheap both to buy and in how it's made, and it's just not very good, I think. So, yeah, I mean, you might have some fun with it for $8, especially if it was on sale. You might definitely have, you know, for $2 or $3, this would absolutely be you know, be worth it, I think. But yeah, I think they should have done better than this. If I were you, I would go get Double Dragon Neon on sale. Or, if you have a Wii U, go pick up Double Dragon 2 on the NES, because I think that's a better game than this, and I think Double Dragon Neon is one of the best Double Dragon games, period. And that game's been out for a while and can frequently be had very cheaply. So, that's what I would do instead, but maybe Arc will take another shot at this and do better by it, but they definitely need to. This doesn't do it at all. So yeah, that is Double Dragon 4, developed and published by Arc System Works. This is the PC version. It is also out on the PlayStation 4. It is $7, but even at $7, I don't think it's a great value. So take that for what you will. Oh, Double Dragon. One day someone will do you right. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked what you saw here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That does help me out a great deal. If you want to watch something else, check out the videos on screen now, and don't forget to follow @PXA Media on Twitter to find out about new stuff first.